Number 25, Utah preseason preview, plus news and notes from across the country on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to Good Morning College Football. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Thank you so much for joining us today as we get ready to talk about the number 25 team in our 2024 CFB Winning Edge preseason team strength power ratings, the Utah Utes, which if you've followed us at all over the last few months, you know we're a little bit lower on Utah than most. In fact, according to odds makers, DraftKings specifically this morning, I checked up and Utah is officially still the favorite to win the Big 12. The odds not quite as good as any other preseason conference favorite, but Utah, understandably, according to the odds makers, according to the market, and a lot of very smart folks out there, are the team to beat in the Big 12. Our numbers see something a little bit different. We already discussed our number 22 team, UCF, as our highest rated Big 12 team preseason. If you missed that, it wasn't us screaming that we know something that nobody else does about UCF. There was a lot of skepticism. We definitely do try to remove opinion from our team strength power ratings as much as we possibly can, and just let the numbers speak for themselves. And as it so happened, Utah came in at number 2 in our preseason Big 12 power ratings, but still absolutely one of the top teams to beat in that new look conference this season. But if you haven't already, want to please ask if you might give this video a like, if you would subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, where you get access to a wide range of content from across all of the C2C network. You get college fantasy football content, new draft best ball show with Chris K and Ethan Sowers. Very excited about that. Of course, Debbie, Campus to Canton Live, all kinds of great stuff on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel just about every single day. The official, keep up with recruiting. I know I need to, but we very much appreciate those of you who have already subscribed to the channel. Give our videos a like and a comment. And of course, if you have subscribed to CampusToCanton.com, where you can do so for as little as $2.99 per month, get access to the Discord, to rankings, tools, written content on the site, those best ball rankings for the underdog, large best ball drafts, which are fairly new and ongoing. Those continue to get updated regularly from the very, very smart folks on the CFF team at CampusToCanton.com. So you can join for as little as $2.99 per month, or you can take a look at some of our higher tiers, including the C2C Winning Edge and All 22 tiers, which include access to a lot of the things that we will be discussing today in our Utah preview, our 2024 team profiles, our returning production database, our stat projections. All of that is available to C2C Winning Edge and All 22 tier members. Before we dig into those Utah projections, we've got a little bit more fall camp coming out as more teams are opening their camps, with August 1st coming up very shortly. We are within 1 month from just about everybody in college football kicking off the 2024 season. We're 24 days officially from week 0 and that handful of games that will get us started. But as we record on the morning of July 31st, we are 1 month from the first full Saturday, week 1 Saturday in college football. So the vast majority of teams will have opened their fall camp by the next time we get together for Good Morning College Football. But we are seeing more and more teams open throughout the course of the week, and a little bit of news trickling out. Not too much that's earth-shattering, but a few items I want to touch on briefly. Jesse Temple of The Athletic was on hand for Wisconsin's day 1 of spring camp, their practice in Platesville. And he opened the piece with kind of an interesting observation and noting that Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer quarterback coming in, expected by just about everyone to start for the Badgers, was actually working with the number 2 offense during a particular drill, and that unit was sent to the sideline because the coaches thought that it was taking too long to get lined up. Temple did, of course, note that Van Dyke and Braden Locke are both taking reps with the number 1 offense so far, during that first practice, but that it was reportedly a pretty sloppy day for the Badgers offense, which lost 6 fumbles over the course of the practice. But reading here from Temple's piece, says, as expected, Van Dyke and Locke rotated with the first and second team offenses. Neither quarterback produced their best day overall, but there were more solid moments from Van Dyke, showing why he has the potential to ultimately win the job. So, my personal expectation is that Tyler Van Dyke was brought in to be the number 1 quarterback. He's going to get every opportunity to win that job, but at least so far, the Wisconsin coaching staff is still challenging him, still rotating Locke into that competition, getting some reps with that number 1 offense. So we will certainly be digging in and finding out more as we can on whether or not Van Dyke's going to be able to lock down that job relatively soon, or if this thing is going to stretch out a little bit closer to kickoff. Cameron Lemons-Debrow of Demon Deacons Digest observed that at Wake Forest, there's a slight surprise, at least to me, as far as the quarterback rotation on day 1 of practice for the Demon Deacons. Michael Kern was taking the first team reps ahead of Hank Bachmeier, who we had projected as our starting quarterback for Wake Forest in our team profiles. I was hesitant to fully make the switch. Me personally, I do think that Bachmeier still has a pretty good shot to come out on top in the competition. But as Debrow noticed or mentioned, Bachmeier went through spring practice. He didn't really nail down the job. Kern was limited by injury, so perhaps getting him a little bit longer look in the early days of fall camp will let the coaching staff know really what they're working with, and we'll see. There's still plenty of time. Day 1 is not a slam dunk if you take that first rep at quarterback that you're going to be there in game 1, but if you are atop the depth chart in that first practice, you have to do less to retain that spot, at least is generally my way of thinking. So went ahead, did make the switch in our team profiles. It did impact our Wake Forest rating and ranking a little bit because Bachmeier, due to his higher recruiting rating coming out of high school when he signed with Boise State, his early experience and production at the FBS level. He's a 36-game starter, has added 5 points of production value to his individual player rating in our team profiles. He's a higher rated player by a fairly wide margin over Kern the way that we calculate it. So, but I didn't want to ignore the insight and what we're getting coming out of fall camp. So did go ahead, make the switch, but we'll be willing to switch back if we get any indication that Bachmeier is pulled even, or especially if he's likely to win that job ahead of week 1. If we hear anything concrete, we'll definitely make the switch, but I'm willing to go in and try to make the best judgment. That when I say we try to remove opinion from our ratings, this is really the only place where it factors in. Is if I'm looking at a particular position group, quarterback especially, and if I have a strong feeling one way or the other that might be just a little bit different than what we're hearing, what we're reading, I might make that judgment call. But for now, since Kern did take that number one rep, went ahead and made the switch, he is currently our number one quarterback on our Wake Forest team profiles depth chart. So we will certainly see what we can find out as we get a little bit closer. The Florida State Seminoles have been at it for about a week now. Have gone through 6 practices, I believe now. After practice 5, Dustin Lewis of Knoll Game Day had a nice write-up that most of the Florida State coverage is always great, is always in depth, but there just hasn't been a lot of newsworthy items to discuss just yet. But according to Lewis, and a couple of things that stuck out to me, I'm seeing the name Hakeem Williams quite a bit among wide receivers. That Florida State group, other than Malik Benson, who seems to be the likely favorite to be the number one target for quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, who is getting some positive buzz this spring as well. There's a little bit of a question, who else is going to emerge as a starting wide receiver, as a playmaker at that position. Ja'Kai Douglas has seen his name pop up quite a bit. Some quotes from Mike Norvell discussing him. I've seen a little, positive mention of Deuce Spann, the former quarterback recruit at Illinois, who's come in. He's a big target. But Hakeem Williams, a little bit more consistently in the early days of spring practice, seeing his name pop up. Reading here from Dustin Lewis of Knoll Game Day, he says that stacking good days together, Hakeem Williams continues to ascend this preseason. He ran a really nice route in one-on-ones to get wide open for a grab in the end zone. Williams made the most of his reps getting open no matter who was at quarterback. He even held on for a tough catch on the sideline where the sophomore took a big hit from Fentrell Cypress II, the former All-American corner. Williams has to keep this steady uptick going, but the Seminoles have to like where things stand after 5 practices. One name that I didn't see very often through the first 5 practices was Alabama transfer running back Roydell Williams. Lewis did mention Williams, showing good balance, and also referenced that the former Alabama running back is now down to 215 pounds. He was previously listed at 225, but it's a very, very deep running back room. Or, of course, Lawrence Tuafele has been there for a long time. He's making plays. Jalen Lucas, his speed is always mentioned. A couple of true freshmen really getting buzz early in spring camp. And then Keziah Holmes, transfer, who's been, not really part of the mix much recently, is also getting a lot of positive attention. So, Williams, we do still have projected as the starter at running back, but we'll keep a close eye on how those reports are coming out. I'm expecting a lot of players to play early in the season at the running back position for Florida State. It'll sort itself out, but there's a chance that I might be willing to move Williams out of our projected number one running back role, depending on how the next few weeks of camp and these reports are starting to come out. But hopefully we'll see Williams' name mentioned a little bit more, because expectations coming as a transfer from Alabama pretty high, and I think he'll have an opportunity to contribute. But running back, probably most would say the deepest position on that Florida State roster, especially on the offensive side. At Kansas, Michael Swain of FOG, the 247 site that covers the Jayhawks, had a little bit of a note, nothing too newsworthy, but all eyes in Lawrence are on quarterback Jalen Daniels. Swain, reading here from the piece, says, obviously the health of Daniels is going to be a big topic during camp. The good news is that he's starting on the right foot. He participated in every drill on Tuesday and didn't have any limitations from what I saw. He was going through ball security drills. He wasn't doing at times during the spring and was throwing during all the drills. Continuing here, he said, I've heard Daniels will be a full go as camp begins. KU will track his workload during camp, but this is a great place to build on for the KU quarterback. So good news so far about Jalon Daniels. He is the biggest question mark for Kansas. We discussed it in the CFP Winning Edge Big 12 preview podcast this past week that, this is a different team if Jalon Daniels is fully healthy compared to if he is unavailable, which certainly, as we remember, he wasn't for a big stretch last year. So good news so far on Jalon Daniels. Hopefully that will continue for Kansas. A couple of final notes here. TCU has added a couple of former FBS head coaches to its staff as analysts. Sonny Dykes confirmed to ESPN's Dave Wilson that Todd Graham, most recently at Hawaii as the head coach prior to Timmy Chang taking over a couple of years ago, and Dana Holgerson, who last season was let go after things went south a bit at Houston. Those two will be on Dykes' staff in analyst roles, I believe, according to reports. With Utah State having officially fired Blake Anderson, the portal is open for the Aggies. Fortunately for Utah State, if you are an Aggies fan, we haven't seen a mass exodus, which would be incredibly damaging this close to fall camp, but one notable name has emerged. Matt Zenitz was the first to report, I believe, that Mycah Davis, the wide receiver, started his career at Air Force, has always been an exciting player to me and seemed like he potentially could have been in line for a big year at Utah State this season, is instead going to transfer. The early buzz that I saw, haven't seen a whole lot of updates just yet, but could be headed to the SEC, with Ole Miss getting mentioned a couple of places. Did want to talk a little bit. I saw a thread on from a journalist, sports editor of the Daily Chronicle in DeKalb, Illinois, Edward Carifio, that shed some light on some of the things that folks are dealing with when they're trying to cover practices at this point in the off season. And we mention it here, and for the most part, I try to do my best to mention where we can get great coverage. Also, of course, try to give credit as much as possible to the reporters who are on the ground doing the work of finding this information and putting it out there. And some programs are just more difficult, don't allow a lot of access, don't allow reporters at practice, or don't allow certain things to be reported, or access could potentially be revoked. And Carifio posted a thread yesterday morning with an update on how Thomas Hammock at Northern Illinois is sort of handling access this spring. And this is specific to that situation, but know that some of this is perhaps going on, and we get questions sometimes in the Campus to Canton Discord. We'll get comments on videos like this, I'm sure. They say, hey, have you heard about X player, X team? Why can't we get information on this or that, or who's starting here, who's starting there? Sometimes the reporters don't know. Sometimes they're not able to share. It can be a little bit tricky. So just wanted to read this thread quickly, but as he put it out there. So Edward Carifio, again, from who covers Northern Illinois, says, so some news about our NIU coverage ahead of practices starting tomorrow. Our coverage is going to be dramatically reduced due to a decision made by the school. Only the first 30 minutes of practice will be open to the media. And if you've seen NIU practices, that's basically warm-ups. So no more top 5 plays from practices, no more top player performances. However, it will also limit how we cover the team during the season. Since I took over the beat in 2020, 2020, I've been trying my best to maximize how I cover the team, despite increasing limitations brought about not only by the economic realities in our field, but by NIU as well. Have to cover high school football at the same time as NIU without a noticeable drop-off in either? Fine. No tweets? Fine. No reporting on injuries? Bring it on. And one of the big ways I did that was through practices. I hit as many as I could before the season started. And during the season, I always made sure I got out to one practice a week. And sure, if a player was hurt, I couldn't write about it, but I could mention a backup poised for a big week. Going to that practice made me less dependent on the coach, who famously does not like talking injuries or any aspect that puts his team at disadvantage, which he feels is pretty much everything from an injury to a midseason offensive coordinator switch. Let me ask better questions. And while I missed things, it definitely gave me the chance to do the job to the best of my ability, but now that's gone. At press conferences, we're basically dependent on everything the coach says, no way to confirm things for ourselves. We're stenographers. So we'll see how it plays out. Maybe this is for camp only, a further way to obfuscate the QB battle. I know this was a very long way of saying we're not going to have near as much NIU coverage for the next weeks as we normally would. What would be 5 to 7 stories will be about 2 to 3. Thank you for bearing with me during this thread. It just felt important to let you know why our coverage will be dramatically less for the next couple of weeks. So, I understand it's been a long time, but I have a little bit of a coaching background, and coaches are very protective. Some might say paranoid that information is going to get out that's going to help an opponent. But on the other hand, I think that what we can learn, certainly, we're a college fantasy football company at campus2canton.com. The work that I've done since 2018 on CFP Winning Edge, we try to find as much information as possible to be able to properly project players and teams and how they will perform on the field. And, it's tough when that access is not available. So just do understand. Again, he said it was a long thread. Obviously, it was long for me to read it all. But this show and others that you'll watch, and the teams that you're trying to find information about through beat reporters and through other outlets, for the most part, everybody wants to bring you as much information as possible. And sometimes we just can't. So as we dig into, or open fall camp across the country, as more information is coming out, we'll pass along the information we can, and as much of it as we can. We'll also try to add a little analysis when possible, but sometimes we just don't know because maybe we're not able to learn. So with that in mind, another team that doesn't allow much media access, really any, I believe, at practices during fall camp, the Utah Utes, number 25 in our preseason CFP Winning Edge team strength power rankings. And Utah, we're a little bit lower than most. Not everyone. There is a bit of a wide range as far as a lot of the media outlets, a lot of the computer-based analytics projection systems. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic, also Phil Steele in his top 40 prediction rankings, have Utah number 8 in the preseason. Mark Schlabach of ESPN has the Utes 9th. In the EA Sports College Football 25 video game, Utah is number 10 in the preseason power rankings. Phil Steele's Power Poll, or the computer system who will be favored against who on a neutral field, that has Utah number 11. Athlon Sports in the preseason magazine has the Utes 14th. Andy Staples of On3 and The Sporting News both had Utah 15th in the most recent rankings. ESPN and Bill Connolly's SP Plus numbers have Utah number 18 nationally, as does Kelly Ford and the K Ford ratings. The Football Power Index at ESPN has Utah 27th, and Beta Rank on the low end for Utah at number 28. So a bit of a wide range there. Number 8, according to more of the opinion-based, media folks analyzing how they're expecting the season to play out. And certainly Utah, as we said, is the betting favorite in the Big 12. So with that in mind, they would be a top 12 team if they were to win the Big 12, make it to the college football playoff. Maybe the ranking wouldn't be 12, but they'd be a top 12 seed, top 11, most likely, with the group of 5 team getting in as well. As far as the odds makers go, again, according to DraftKings, which is just habit, who I happen to check, 18th in the national title odds to win the college football playoff at 60-1 for Utah. They're tied for 16th to make the college football playoff, which was a little bit of a surprise. I thought that they'd be a little higher on the list there, but plus 220 for Utah to make the college football playoff, and our Big 12 favorites plus 320. So a little less than 3.5 to 1 there. But as I mentioned before, worse odds than anyone else who is a conference preseason favorite, according to DraftKings. And one last note here, as we look ahead, and a lot of what we will discuss in this preview is why there's so much more optimism for Utah now, is the quarterback position. The offense, on paper, should be much, much better than it was last season, in large part due to quarterback Cam Rising returning from injury after missing all of last season. Tight end Brant Kuithe, the same situation. Was an all-conference performer earlier in his career, considered, one of the better players at his position, and unavailable last season. So the numbers took a dip, but both of those guys coming back seemingly fully healthy, 100% on the field this year. Understandably, a lot of the projection systems, ours included, that rely at least in part on past performance to project how this year is expected to shape up, because this team was different last season, and the way it played was severely impacted by not having 2 of its best players, arguably its 2 best players on offense. That can throw off the numbers a little bit. We think we do a pretty good job of compensating for that, but obviously, a lot of the media, national outlet folks, and a lot of these rankings, the Athletic, the Sporting News, the Athlon, and ESPN Schlabaugh's power rankings expect Utah to be even more improved than we do. But we've mentioned David Hale and his great piece from earlier this summer, where he put all 134 quarterback situations at the FBS level into tiers. He's got Utah and Cam Rising in tier 2, alongside Arizona, Colorado, Kansas, and Miami. And want to read his observation here. He puts it really, really well. Says, quoting here, "It's pretty easy to quantify just how much Rising means to Utah statistically. Over the past 3 years with Rising at quarterback, the Utes averaged 6.6 yards per play, 7.6 yards per drop back, posted an 83.9 raw quarterback rating, and scored 39.1 points per game in his starts. With anyone else at quarterback, 5.3 yards per play, 5.7 yards per dropback, 51.3 QBR, and then 24.2 points per game. How many other QBs in the country are worth 15 points per game to their team?" So with that in mind, let's take a look at our CFB Winning Edge team profiles and take a look a little deeper into how last season played out. Again, if this is your first time with us, our team profiles have 134 tabs with each team, have some national rankings tabs as well. But we open up with kind of a stat and information area in the top left corner, our projected depth charts, and our offensive player information on the left-hand side. We've got defense and some history on the right-hand side, transfers, injuries, all that good stuff, walk-ons, and other depth players. But in the middle, We've got our recruiting and talent numbers, how everything breaks out by position, how things get adjusted based on experience and production. We call that our position strength ratings. Our individual player ratings, we do the same thing. Take the recruiting rating coming out of high school, adjust based on just number of years as far as experience goes, but then, more importantly, the production players are able to add through on-field performance and reaching statistical benchmarks. And then the schedule. How do our projections shape up? We've got 3 different projection models. And then at the bottom, we've got last season, how things shook out. For Utah, got off to a great start, even without Rising available. The win over Florida in impressive fashion, 94% post-game win expectancy. We're able to get by Baylor, snuck by 20-13, just 63% on that post-game win expectancy, but far more dominant against both Weber State and UCLA, even though that UCLA game quite close in the final margin. Oregon State, kind of the opposite. Statistically speaking, if you were to rerun that game 100 times, 1,000 times, however many, according to collegefootballdata.com, which is where we get these post-game win expectancy numbers, Oregon State would have won that game 100% of the time, even though it was just 21-7. But Utah comes out on the wrong end there, gets back with back-to-back wins after an off week against Cal and USC. That USC win, very impressive, especially at the time. USC was very much expected to be in the mix for a playoff spot, one of those top 4 spots. But Oregon, things certainly went south. Oregon dominated that day. Started a period where Utah lost 3 of 4 games with a 55-3 win over Arizona State. The only positive. That Washington loss was very, very close. And statistically speaking, Utah would have won that game 2 out of 3 times, according to collegefootballdata.com. Split the last 2, get a win over Colorado, lose to Northwestern, somewhat surprisingly, in the bowl game. And because Utah lost that bowl game with a 2/3 or so expected win percentage statistically, the Washington State as well, those 2 losses, you would have expected, if you were to add those up, Utah to win 1.3 games out of those 2. So a little bit unlucky, you could say, a little bit unfortunate. Some coaching sometimes goes into those sorts of things. There's no clear and obvious reason why a team might have a better or worse second order win number there. But at least according to collegefootballdata.com, when we add up all these post-game win expectancies and look at those second order wins, this Utah team was a little bit closer to a 9-win team than the 8-5 it finished last year. Statistically, and we touched a little bit on it, Utah struggled on the offensive side of the ball. The defense was not elite, but it was, a top 30 unit in our team performance ratings, where we take dozens of advanced stats and try to focus on how a team will play against FBS opponents only in the regular season only, and then also filter for garbage time when we can. We make a similar rating, use the same scales we do our individual player ratings, our team ratings, all that, put it as a team performance rating. Utah was 30th in defensive team performance last season, 29th against the pass, 35th against the run. But because the offense was much, much worse, statistically speaking, 95th in overall offensive team performance, 91st passing, 86th rushing, Utah finished 46th in overall team performance. So played more like a top 50 team than, a top 25 team that we've gotten used to Utah. And in a lot of ways, much better. If you look at the 3-year weighted team performance rating, which does include last season as the biggest factor, Utah ranks 22nd over that 3-year window. Over a 5-year window, Utah has been a top 15 team. So if you were to throw out last season, Utah would be much more in line for top 15, top 10 over the last 3 to 5 years. So last season, without Cam Rising available, without Brant Kuithe, with that offense really struggling, we saw a much, much different team. You can see, stat by stat in some of our favorites, scoring offense, Utah ranked 84th, yards per play, 96th, points per drive, according to Brian Fremeau of bcftoys.com, 78th, 102nd in yards per pass attempt, 86th in success rate, and 105th in the EPA per play equivalent we use from collegefootballdata.com. They call it PPA. The defense, much, much better in every category, but still, we're used to seeing Utah, team performance-wise, defensively, they've been a top 10 defense in the past. It's been a little while. 2018, 2019, they were 6th and 7th, respectively. We've seen a little bit inching in the wrong direction, but got used to just being able to pencil Utah in as a top 25 defense. In last season, a little bit of room for improvement on that, but 24th in scoring defense, 50th in yards per play allowed, 29th in points per drive, 65th in yards per pass attempt. So again, that was a real area of improvement, could be an area of improvement, creating more big plays through the air, stopping big plays through the air. But success rate, top 20 nationally at number 19 overall, and then 51st in the EPA per play equivalent defensively. If you put it out on margin or on net, Utah was 56th in scoring margin, outscoring its opponents by 3 points per game. FBS opponents only, regular season only, once again. 75th in net yards per play, 58th in net points per drive, 86th in net yards per pass attempt, 38th in net success rate, and 86th in EPA margin or PPA margin. So there were some bright spots, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But for the most part, this Utah team, we expect to take a step in the right direction this season on the field. So switching over now to our returning production database. Who's coming back from last season? Who's not? If we were just to look at the raw numbers, only across the country, who on your 2024 roster is coming back from 2023, Utah would rank 69th overall in returning production, 104th on the offensive side of the ball, 26th defensively. If you adjust that for transfers, and in Utah's case, added injuries. We did put in Cam Rising's 2022 numbers. We also put in Brant Kuithe's 2022 numbers. That gives Utah a little bit of a boost as well. Plus the transfer of Sam Heward, former 5-star Washington signee who spent last season at Cal Poly, the FCS level. That helps offset a little bit of the passing production lost when Bryson Barnes transferred to Utah State, when Nate Johnson transferred to Vandy. So you see that the numbers work out a little bit better than you otherwise would have expected when 96+% of last season's pass attempts were gone, 96% of the completions and yards, and all 100% of last season's 15 touchdown passes, 11 picks as well, moving on. So if Cam Rising is able to play at the level he did in 2022, those numbers should take a significant step forward. He had over 3,000 yards passing, nearly 8 yards per pass attempt, so that would be a big, big improvement. 26 touchdown passes, a significant step forward there. Also took care of the football a little bit better. So Rising, a big, big addition. In the running game, the Utes lost Jaquindon Jackson, a personal favorite of mine, to transfer. He is at Arkansas now. Bring in a very productive running back in Anthony Woods from the FCS level. He had over 1,100 yards and 16 touchdowns at Idaho last season. Jalen Glover is the leading returning rusher from last season's team, 562 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. But Micah Bernard, who was limited to just 2 games last season, expected by most to get that first carry of the season, but could be, at least a 2 running back rotation, maybe 3 with Woods, Glover, and Bernard all there in the mix. Cam Rising, of course, can run it a little bit and had nearly 500 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground 2 years ago. But to stay healthy, don't be surprised if Utah tries to keep him in the pocket a little bit more and let those running backs do the work. So There's, again, a lot to replace, but because of Woods coming in, because of Rising coming back, the numbers offset a little bit compared to where they could have. The receiving core got an influx of production with Damien Alford, a late transfer from Syracuse. He was a big play performer for the Orange last season, 18.5 yards per catch, and was targeted deep downfield, 14.6, that average depth of target. Be very interested to see how he fits in. Dorian Singer was went through spring practice. He was a big-time performer in the spring game. He and Cam Rising look like they have built a rapport quite quickly. Money Parks coming back as the top receiver returning in terms of yardage and catches. All those three seem like they will have an opportunity to replace the production lost by Devon Vele moving on to the NFL. Mikey Matthews transferred out, but getting Brant Kuithe back, and he was limited in 2022. He's got more potential than just 19 catches, 206 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, the addition of those players is going to be key. Helps offset some of the losses. But even Kuithe, couldn't fully add the production that he is capable of there based on past performance. But the tight end position beyond Kuithe should be quite deep with the addition of Carson Ryan, the return of Landon King as well. So the wide receiver core, and a name that, again, kind of like Micah Bernard, who is expected to be a starter and didn't put up very much, didn't have an opportunity to play very much last season. The same goes for Mycah Pittman, who just played in 2 games, had 3 catches for 20 yards. A lot of positive reports about him coming out of spring, and we have him currently projected as a starter. The offensive line, 2 full-time starters are moving on, graduated out of eligibility. One half-time, part-time starter at center is on the move as a transfer, but 2 full-time starters return. 2 others that started multiple games for the Utes last season are back. So every position group, every statistical category on the offensive side of the ball has questions. Even with Rising back, we need to see him on the field fully healthy. We're hearing great reports, but still a little bit of an unknown there, especially, is he going to be the same type player running the football? And maybe he shouldn't be, you could say. New faces at receiver, relying on a couple of guys who are injured at running back and receiver as well. Tight end, of course. A couple of new faces on the offensive line. So this Utah team, understandably, we're optimistic, but still, some questions at each level. Defensively, a lot more is coming back. Certainly, 3 of the biggest losses, guys left early for the NFL, Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki at safety. Vaki, of course, you saw his name listed there on the offensive side of the ball as well. He added a real spark at running back. But defensive end Jonah Ellis, him moving on. Also, Jatavis Broughton has been a starter in the secondary. He transferred out. But some transfers coming in, including Paul Fitzgerald, who had 34 pressures last season at Utah State, should be able to help offset some of that production lost by Ellis. He had 9 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. Ellis had 15.5 tackles for loss and 11.5 sacks. So big shoes to fill. But Utah, a little more active in the transfer portal on the defensive side of the ball to help replace those guys. So how does it all look for this season? Going back to our team profile and the offensive depth chart, as practice is opening, if we are able to get some reports out of Kyle Whittingham and that Utah coaching staff, we'll make some updates. But as of right now, as we understand it, based on reporting from the beat reporters and other projections we've seen, this is what we've got on the offensive side of the ball. Bernard right now penciled in at running back. Wouldn't be shocked if somebody else emerges as the go-to running back eventually, but as it stands right now, sounds like Bernard is the top player at that position. We put in Money Parks as a returning starter, Dorian Singer as the transfer coming in, and Mycah Pittman, based on him back and fully healthy, as our starting wideouts. Damien Alford certainly could emerge there. Munir McClain, who has played wide receiver and tight end in the past as well. We listed a couple of tight ends on the 2 deep because Utah will certainly use multiple players at that position on the field at the same time. And the offensive line looks good as far as experience goes on the right-hand side, but 3 new starters, even though there is some, starting experience back elsewhere on the offensive line as well. Defensively, there is quite a bit of experience just in terms of, are you a starter coming back in the front 7, most notably 3 starters up front, both linebackers, Kareem Reed being an all-conference performer at that position, Junior Tafuna, of course, in the interior as well. And even though he wasn't a starter, Connor O'Toole played pretty much starter-type snaps last season and has been a starter 9 times in his career. 2 guys coming back as full-time starters in the secondary, corner Zemiah Vaughn and safety Dallas Johnson. Couple of likely first-year starters as transfers coming in there as well. Keenan Johnson, the corner, Alaki Gilman at safety, and hopefully some players coming back from injury. Logan Fano, who was off to a phenomenal start last season before going down, should be back. Lavani Damuni, a linebacker as well. So Utah defensively, as usual, we're expecting that unit to play very, very well. Top 30, like it was last season, seems like a lock. Top 25, top 20, maybe even a little bit better, certainly within the realm of possibility. How does it stack up as far as pure talent goes? And usually when I mention, raw talent, pure talent, that's just my way of saying, average recruiting rating coming out of high school. And Utah is certainly one of the programs that has proven that recruiting ratings, as good as they are and as helpful as they are, and they are the first ingredient in our individual player ratings, they're not perfect. There are plenty of players out there who are under the radar, relative unknowns that a great coaching staff is able to find and develop, like Utah, like Kyle Whittingham and his staff. But as far as raw talent goes, Utah offensively, 32nd in average 247 rating on the offensive side of the ball, 28th defensively, 32nd overall. The areas where they're a little more talented than most, top 25 at the quarterback position, top 20 on the offensive line, 18th at linebacker. When we adjust those recruiting ratings for on-field performance as well as experience at the college level, we see Utah take a jump. The quarterback position with Cam Rising slotted in. He's number 11 in our starter ratings among individual quarterbacks. Number 8 for Utah overall at the quarterback position. Again, Heward, being a former 5-star, is still a relatively highly rated player. There's more competition for that role as well. So overall, that quarterback group, which was a major concern last year, should be a real strength of this team this season, with Kuithe leading the way, the number 1 tight end room in the country. And the offensive line, somewhat oddly, goes a little bit in the opposite direction. 45th in our position strength ratings. Again, just on paper, how well are these players rated as far as their current situation? Because it is a little bit on the inexperienced side, that number went down a bit. But I think that Utah offensive line, honestly, a little bit underrated in our numbers here. In the front 7, it's a top 15 unit defensively, number 1 in the Big 12 among front 7, with the defensive line ranked 23rd nationally, 3rd in the conference. Linebacker group 10th nationally, 3rd in the Big 12. The secondary, little bit of a question mark, 56th overall, 10th in the conference. But again, with the influx of talent, with a couple of starters returning, with Utah's track record of playing very, very well, don't be surprised if we're underrating those players a little bit. But also, sometimes, even though a team like Utah consistently outperforms its talent level, and this Utah team is pretty talented, and as far as our overall roster strength, top 20 nationally, top 20 both on the offensive side of the ball and defensively, 17th and 20th respectively. This Utah team is solid, but maybe our numbers, if you are like me and trying to look for a reason maybe to believe that maybe we're onto something, maybe Utah isn't the best team in the Big 12. What are some reasons? What are some areas of weakness that could potentially play out for this team to come up short of its status as the favorite? Maybe it's the offensive line. Maybe it's the secondary. The running back room, doesn't rate super well, but as we said, pretty deep. I think they're going to be fine there. Honestly, I think Utah's going to be fine personally, but the numbers, like I said, try to let them speak for themselves. See a few imperfections, and because of that, even though Utah is has a favorable schedule, ranks 51st in our strength of schedule rankings at CFB Winning Edge, comparing to the win total, the regular season win total from DraftKings, which is 9.5, and the odds are at minus 145, I think, this morning to go over. So you can get some plus money on the under, and our projections do see this Utah team coming significantly under, and my level of confidence in that isn't particularly high. I do understand why folks have Utah as the favorite in the Big 12, but as good as this team can be, especially if things work out at the quarterback position and that offense takes a big step forward, we do have Utah favored in 10 regular season games. There are plenty of losable games on the schedule as well. Going to Stillwater, second straight road game, even though it's not going to be a long trip the week before at Utah State. That's a little bit of a tricky spot at Stillwater. It's a tough place to play. Oklahoma State getting a little buzz as a Big 12 title contender, understandably so. They were underrated, I think, for a good part of the preseason. That's a coin flip. Utah absolutely could win that game, especially if they're able to limit Ollie Gordon in that Oklahoma State offense. But then getting Arizona immediately after Oklahoma State, you're playing maybe the best running back in the country, certainly on the short list, an All-American candidate in Ollie Gordon, and then you're playing maybe the best wide receiver in the country in Ted McMillan the very next week, and his great connection with Noah Fafita. That's a tough first two Big 12 matchups, because that Baylor Week 2 game, skipped over that, isn't a Big 12 conference game. That was on the schedule prior, if I understand correct. Believe I do. But 10 Big 12 teams on the schedule, only 9 of those count as conference games. Oklahoma State and Arizona, that's a pretty tough draw in the first 2 weeks of conference play. Do get a week off before things, at least in theory, get a little bit easier. But at Arizona State, home against TCU, at Houston, there's none of those are automatic. Our numbers, I would say, might be a little low as far as the projected win percentage. I personally would probably say that Utah's maybe a 90% chance of winning at Arizona State, probably an 85% chance of winning at Houston. But still, nevertheless, it's there. We've seen Utah. It doesn't happen very often, but we have seen Utah sometimes drop a game that it probably shouldn't. And going on the road 2 out of 3 weeks, if Arizona State, if Houston take a big step forward with relatively new coaching staffs, brand new for Houston, those matchups could be a little tougher maybe than expected. Getting BYU at home in the Holy War is we see Utah having a big edge in that game. Colorado on the road, a little bit tricky there, but Utah has had a strong track record against the Buffs in the past. Very familiar program. Iowa State, that's another one. Very, very experienced team. Seems like our numbers maybe are a little low on the Cyclones, but think that especially at the end of the year, we saw how they really finished strong last season. That running game took a big step forward at the end of the year last year. Perhaps that the Utes are going to be challenged there, and then this one might surprise some folks, but UCF, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is our highest rated team in the Big 12. It's not my opinion, just sort of how the ratings worked out. Maybe we're onto something. Maybe we've got UCF overrated, but having to go to Orlando cross country at the Bounce House, that's going to be a tricky finale. That's going to be a difficult spot for Utah at the end of the regular season. Long travel day, short week. That game's on a Friday. Most folks that you're going to see out there probably won't have UCF favored in that game, but that's going to be tough. I think that it's very likely that the a spot in the Big 12 championship game might be on the line for Utah in that finale at Orlando, and it'll be tough. It'll be tough for Utah. We do have two other projection models. In the Talent Edge model, somewhat surprisingly, we think of Utah as being a team that consistently outperforms its level of talent, but it looks pretty good on paper, especially with rising back. We actually have Utah with the talent edge in all 12 regular season games, so they will not be outmanned as far as roster strength goes. There is a slight home field advantage adjustment there, but Utah looking good on paper. The projection model where Utah usually really performs quite well, we call it PRISM, or projected scoring margin. It's our stats only model. So the Talent Edge looks at only the roster information, only the talent. The PRISM model looks only at stats. That's usually where Utah is at its best. But we see the Utes as a slight underdog against both Oklahoma State and Iowa State, not UCF, but Iowa State there. So getting over that 9.5 wins, absolutely. We've got Utah favored in 10. If they take care of business, no problem. We've got Utah having the more talented team in 12 games. So could the Utes run the table? Absolutely. Could things, not work out quite as well? Perhaps. I mean, there are tough games on the schedule. The Big 12 is very, very competitive, I think, wide open. There are 5-6 teams I could see winning this conference. Utah is absolutely one of them. Understand why most folks seem to think that they are the team to beat, but there's some tricky spots. There are some difficult matchups, some trouble spots, some travel that maybe isn't exactly how you would draw it up. But this Utah team is going to be, I think, very good, very competitive, very solid, and certainly in the mix in the Big 12. So, and with that, they take care of business, win the conference, they'll be in the college football playoff, and we'll see, how good this team could be in that scenario. But that will do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We've now done a full preview of all of our top 25 teams in our CFP Winning Edge team strength power ratings. We will, as you saw, as we went into the first 20 minutes or so with some news and some other discussion, probably going to be a little shorter on the previews. We will try to, unless we just get bombarded with a bunch of news, we will continue our team previews on Good Morning College Football as we record Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So with that in mind, we will be back on Friday. By that time, I think every FBS team will have opened fall camp. Maybe there'll be a couple of stragglers there later, but believe that every team will be within that 30 day window and hitting the practice field at the very least. So we will look for more information, injuries, depth chart news, all that good stuff. Any other updates we will try to pass along. So do come back on Friday to check that out. Thank you so much for giving this video a like. Thank you for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. And thank you for considering a membership at campustocanton.com. You can join for as little as $2.99 per month, or take a look at our C2C Winning Edge and All 22 tiers and get access to these team profiles, our returning production database that we showed, our stat projections as well. All of those, again, we try to remove the opinion, let the experts who have, the great analysis dig in and see, add a little more context. We try to deal with, just the specific information and what we see and let the numbers speak for themselves. Not saying one way is better than the other, certainly not saying we're better, but, just a little bit of a different look at it that, is valuable, I think. But we'll be back on Friday. Again, I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. We will be back for another preview and some fall camp news and notes later this week. Till then, take care.